Hi everyone, my name is Ian Lawless, Conference Director here at Procurement Leaders. Delighted to be giving you an overview today of what to expect next week at the fourth and final instalment of Procurement Leaders Innovation in Series. We've had a brilliant series so far with focuses on positive growth, resilient supply networks and digitalisation and tech. Delighted to say we're going to be finishing off the series with a regional look at innovation Asia Pacific next week on the 15th and 16th of June, Tuesday and Wednesday, as we take a look at those above headlines that I just mentioned and look at them through the lens of the unique challenges that we face for our community in Asia Pacific. I'm joined today by John Webb, Head of Advisory at Procurement Leaders, and Alex Sarich, Chief Marketing Officer at Ivalua, who I'm delighted to say our headline partner for next week's event. Welcome to you both.
Great, thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you both for being here. Alex and John are going to be discussing in a little bit more detail one of the critical topics we're going to be focusing on next week in a few minutes' time. But before we do so, just a little bit of positioning and some context on what it is that we're going to be talking about next week with our senior leaders. So we're going to be exploring certain questions. What are we going to be posing? Asia Pacific has led the way towards a great global restart as we journey through the COVID-19 pandemic, but where now for globalization and global supply chains? We're going to look at whether a shift to more regional reliance is going to come either from a national or from a multinational perspective. Across the 3 days, going to be exploring how to identify the right tactics, skills and technology to achieve sustainability goals, drive financial and ethical impact, as well as develop a sustainability roadmap that puts teams in a strong position to turn good procurement into procurement for good. But day one, we have a particular focus on Asia Pacific and that global economic restart. And digitalization is a real driver for positive, innovative transformation. As the global economy does begin to rebound and trade routes open, we're going to be exploring what this has looked like for the Asia Pacific and beyond, with a deep dive into the disruptive nature of COVID-19 and how businesses have witnessed an unprecedented acceleration in need for all things digital and innovative. Then on day two, we will focus on supply chain redesign to really look at long-term sustainability, resilience and business growth. I think it's fair to say that procurement's resiliency has played a key role in keeping organisations and staff buoyant. We will discuss what the new corporate reality looks like and how to position procurement, supply chain and our businesses for enhanced resilience going forward. And we're going to further explore how the function is looking beyond the crisis, crystallising 2020's efforts to support the entire procurement vision and evolving value proposition that will help us to enable ESG, innovation and revenue generating initiatives as well. So a brilliant lineup of speakers that we've got across the event from the likes of Dole International, the World Bank, Siemens, Pfizer, IHG, Danone and many more. So a lot to look forward to next week. But that's enough from me. As I mentioned, I'm very happy to be joined by Alex and John today. They're going to be having a little discussion now around what to look forward to from their session next week, and a topic that's really, really relevant to all of us at the moment. So John, over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Ian. And it sounds like a very exciting, edifying and interesting session that you've got lined up for us. So really look forward to participating in that over the next weeks. It's in a way of a deep dive. We have more of a brief dive here with Alex to talk about some of those innovations that we'll be expecting to see at Innovation in Asia Pacific. So Alex, let's throw some difficult questions straight your way. Be good to hear your views about Agile. Within Procurement Leaders, we've seen an enormous transformation of companies adopting Agile operating models, or indeed deploying some Agile methodologies within individual digital initiatives. So what's your view of Agile, and what do you think the importance of data is in Agile transformations?
So data, it's absolutely critical, and I don't think that comes as a surprise to anyone in the audience. We consistently see making better decisions and improving data quality as a top priority. But to really build an agile function, which you need in today's environment, the market is so dynamic, there's so many unforeseen risks that keep hitting us. I mean, you absolutely have to have visibility into quality data that you can trust and have access to it when and where you need it. Otherwise, how can you possibly assess your risk, opportunities when challenges erupt? How can you evaluate courses of action? If you look at supplier information, for example, You have to have a 360-degree view of suppliers if you're going to accurately determine the risk. If you're going to pick the right portfolio of suppliers for a category with diversified risk, you have to understand their profiles. If disruption hits, you need to know where you can shift supply among current suppliers, potentially new suppliers. And the reality is most organizations in this area are still far behind from where they need to be. And that particularly applies, and I'd say the situation is quite dire when it comes to data and visibility into the sub-tier, which certainly the past year has demonstrated just how vulnerable we are to sub-tier risks. And also if we look about ESG and other objectives that procurement's increasingly being asked to support that require a lot of ongoing improvement and deep visibility into the supply chain, you absolutely have to have it. So there's a huge amount of room to improve. I think companies acknowledge it, but they still have a lot of work to do.
So just on that improvement vein of thought then, so do we have the skills that we need in procurement to execute against this data initiative? And if we don't, how do we go about developing them?
So we've made significant improvement. I'd say particularly in the last 5 years, a lot of organizations have really invested in more analytical skills with talent that they're bringing on board or training. So we've made a tremendous amount of improvements in terms of that. And we see that we've done a survey on smarter procurement about a year ago with Forrester. The analytical skills were not one of the top challenges. I think about 27% of respondents said it was a key challenge to them. So we've definitely made a lot of ground. Now that said, there's still a lot of room to improve at really almost any organization. And there are a handful of companies that really have a big gap. What I've seen to be most effective here is more of a coaching approach. I think analytical skills are not something that you can just pick up by taking an online course or having training. It can help, but the reality is people need to really understand how to apply it to their daily work, the tasks that they're trying to solve. So what I found work very effectively at some organizations is where they bring on someone that's very strong, external talent onto the team and have them actually support the rest of the team in more of a coaching role to support the analysis they're trying to do, help them work with their specific data environment, because those details are what really are important. It's not just about taking a general course on spreadsheet analysis. You need to know how to apply the data that is available to you and your organization to your specific challenges and work that you're doing.
Okay, that's really interesting to hear. So moving from the fine grain to the more of a helicopter CPO view, what's your advice or prescriptions for CPOs and other leaders considering when they're going through their data transformation? What do they need to consider when they're addressing their roadmaps and their evolving technology landscapes?
Yeah, so first and foremost, there is a huge opportunity whenever you're undergoing a digital transformation and bringing on new technology in the source-to-pay space to really address a lot of these issues. But most organizations do not properly take advantage of it. I don't see enough organizations really think about data as a key part of their transformation. It's a bit of a secondary thing that they evaluate. So I think we missed the opportunity. And there are two areas that you really need to look at. One is if you're bringing on technology, one, what's it going to do for the transparency among what procurement, supply chain, AP leaders are working on in that source to pay process. And the second is, how can it actually fix problems that exist in the backend systems, typically ERPs? Because there is an opportunity to do both. Now, in the former case, within the procurement activities, supplier data, source to pay processes, there, I think one of the fundamental flaws too many take is the approach to technology. There's a lot of best of breed approaches or people that bring on suites, but the suites were cobbled together via acquisition or silo development. What happens is then you end up having different supplier records. You create a supplier in sourcing, it's one record. You create one in the procurement process, that's another. You get one coming in through the spend data, that's a third record. You have all these different records and they don't actually sync. So you don't have real-time visibility, you don't have that transversal view. A lot of times they'll try to patch it with a data layer that will try to match everything together. And that helps, but it injects an unnecessary potential for error. And anyone that's worked with spend analysis knows that supplier matching remains imperfect. So it's really important to understand, is the technology going to unify the data? Is there, and the unified data model means there's one record. It's one record when you enter it in sourcing and SRPM and contract management and P2P. That means anything that happens is real-time available. You don't have to inject that extra layer of error. And you're automatically going to have clean data and transparency into what you're doing. So that's one. And then the second side, I'd say it's really important to keep in mind that you can actually also fix issues outside of the source to P process with the technology. There are a lot of technologies that have master data management capabilities. They can unify your supplier tables and the back-end ERPs that you have and any other systems as well, and actually fix a lot of the lingering issues that organizations have built up over time. Now, Chassis Brakes International, now part of Hitachi, is a good example. We worked with them and effectively became their supplier master as part of their source to pay digitization. In their case, integrating with 25 SAP instances around the world and unifying that data. So they finally had a cohesive view. They were able to build global category strategies, be able to intelligently rationalize the supply base with the suppliers that really were performing at a global level to the standard that they wanted, improved relationships with the suppliers, and concentrate volume to actually lower prices as well. So it's a win-win, but too many companies don't fully grasp the potential of technology to address these issues, and then they end up making suboptimal decisions and then throwing Band-Aids on after the fact. So try to avoid that up front when you're planning.
Okay, that's really interesting to hear, and I think we're seeing as well a lot of companies are struggling with a lot of their digital transformation around data. And one final point here is, and you mentioned this earlier in relation to a lot of interest in terms of ESG and risk, for example, and we're certainly seeing these still as high up there on the agenda. It's not going away for our CPO community. So what's your view here in relation to supply chain visibility? And where do you think companies are in terms of how they can drive and improve their capabilities around supply chain visibility?
A lot of the more strategic objectives, and in particular ESG and risk, struggle with visibility. It's just an ongoing problem. We actually completed a recent study, it's not been published yet, on ESG, specifically, and a lot of the lessons that apply there are just as relevant to risk in other areas. By far the top strategy being employed by the organizations that have been most successful is more closely collaborating with suppliers in two core ways. First, you can require those suppliers to provide visibility into their suppliers to get visibility into the sub-tier. And that helps understand both risk, ESG, and other opportunities. And the second, they're also building and kind of actively managing improvement plans and monitoring those. In both cases, platforms that support collaboration are really important. Suppliers often lack their own tools. Sending spreadsheets back and forth to try to capture their sub-tier and then updating it in your own system, it's just very inefficient. It doesn't let you capture information on that suppliers other than what's provided. But by entering it directly in the platform, you can then pull third-party information on those sub-tier suppliers to assess their sustainability and other factors, make it a lot more scalable and have everything in one place. And then the technology can also support creating action plans, improvement plans, and automatically notifying people of progress, gaps, any opportunities. So the technology is really key to scaling, saving time and ensuring that all the information is available in one place. And that's really key, is we're trying to drive these benefits across more of the suppliers, more of the categories. So scale is really important. Picking up the phone and emailing and spreadsheets, that's just not going to cut it anymore.
Fantastic. Well, Alex, you've given us a real tantalizing taste of what we can expect at our next event next week. So we really appreciate your insights. And without further ado, I'll hand over to my colleague, Ian.
Thanks very much, John. Thank you very much, Alex. Very much looking forward to the event next week and more from both of you throughout the sessions. We do indeed have one final thought-provoking event to round out the Innovation in series next week, 15th to 16th of June. Please mark the time and the dates in your calendar, 9 till 12 Singapore time there. And please do sign up at www.inin.procurementleaders.com/Asia Pacific. Really looking forward to the event next week and to welcoming everybody there. And that's all from us for now.